Begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Kidushin Daf Mem Hey. Begin 9 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where the Gemara is in the middle of a conversation relating to the halacha of Rabbi Shmuel from the previous Daf. We had mentioned the previous Mishnah, opening up this parak, Ish Mekadesh. We said that one of the halachas was that Av could be Mekadesh as Bitoy Naira. So we got into a conversation, okay, the father could get his daughter engaged, boy, b'shlucha, him and his agent. The question was regarding the girl herself, and we got into the conversation regarding these Kedusha of a Naira without her father. So in that conversation, we got, okay, what's with a Katana? Now, Katana, that should not be a conversation because she has no yad. She can't do her own Kedushin. But the question was, maybe the father subsequently is going to be okay with it. So we had this halacha of Rabbi Shmuel that tzricha get but tzricha min, which we're going to discuss in a moment. So it's regarding that halacha of Rabbi Shmuel that we said that you need miyun and you need a get, that we're going to have a halacha now regarding that of a yavam, how that happens with the transition into the brother-in-law, with the same halacha of saying, hey, we're not sure, maybe Nesratza Av קידושין, and therefore you would require miyun there too, or maybe not. Cheers, corresponds to Kazakh and the Cheskan, joining today's daf. Some of the discussed in today's daf are, like we mentioned, Kidushin Daf. If you have a young girl, let's say a 10-year-old girl, gets engaged, Shaloila Dasavia, this is what we mentioned on the previous stuff, without her father's knowledge. So he said tzricha get, but tzricha min, which the mother had asked. It says, if you need a get, that means to say that there was engagement. And if there was no, and if you're saying miyun, that means there wasn't, and therefore just rabbinic. So how could you require both get and miyun? That's what the Gemara had explained, that we were concerned that maybe the father is going to be okay with it, but at the same time we require miyun, as we're going to shortly explain why they require miyun. The halacha of, that's what the Gemara starts off. Today's daf is mace. If let's say that guy dies, and then this one that did Kedushin without the father's knowledge to the Ketana, and then he falls in front of the brother V'yibum, when the Marav says, so if he does a mimer, which is rabbinic Kedushin, that applies to a yavam, you have to do mean for that mimer, but the gets a little bit of a complex stuff. There's many different layers here of just of concepts that are just built one other for the cases that are being discussed, but you don't need miyun for the zika, which zika is when there's a relationship, a bond between when the brother dies without any children, that zika that there is to the yavam, for that you don't have to have miyun, as we'll explain in the Gemara. The Gemara in Amud Beis mentioned the concept that although we're having this whole conversation of Shem and Nisrat Ha'av, when this 10-year-old girl does Kedushin, there's no halacha that she can get herself engaged. It's just that maybe the father is going to be okay, and the father is the one who has the rights, and saying, okay, require get, require me, we're not really sure, whatever. But Shem and Nisrat Ben Le'amrim, we're not going to say that maybe the son, when the father gets his son engaged, we're not going to say, oh, maybe the son is going to be okay because the father has no rights in his son, he has rights in his daughter. The father gets him, say, I got you a great shidduch. We're not assuming that maybe the son's going to be okay with that. And additionally, derech b'zoyin loy, this whole thing that we're concerned that maybe the father's okay, if it was done in a degrading way, then we're not going to have a concern that maybe the father can be okay with Kidushin. That's not how you get my daughter engaged, and therefore the whole halacha would not apply. Additionally, the Gemara discusses whether a katana who married a kohen without her father's knowledge, or this all based on this whole concept of, she's not allowed to do it herself, but we're concerned that maybe the father's going to be okay with it, that whether she may eat truma or not, because of, well, if he's not okay with it, then it turns out she was really never a wife of a kohen during that whole time. Also, the Gemara discusses regarding this kachla das avia. What happens if the Kedushin was with her father's knowledge, but then her father went overseas, and then she goes and gets married without the father knowing? What's going to be the halacha there? Well, let's say this kachla das v'nisa shloila das v'avia kan. This is where, again, there's a very complex daf, just with all the different variables. Let's say the father's still here, but she got married without his knowledge. Or the last case is Neskachel Shaloila Das. She got engaged actually without his knowledge. Vanessa Shaloila Das, she got married without his knowledge. Vavikan, the father said, we're actually paradoxically, we'll see that actually there it actually might be Kidushin, even though the previous case, that same mandam will actually hold not. I think everyone's going to wonder how that even be possible. So we learned in the previous daf, just to quickly review, because that's going to be the basis of what we're going to start discussing right now, the following halacha. Katana shenisgacha. Now, if a 10-year-old girl gets herself engaged, it's not halachically valid. She's not an adult. She cannot get herself engaged. She did it but shaloi l'dasavia, without her father's knowledge. So Rav and Shmuel both said, Shmuel said the teaching, and then they sent it in front of Rav, and Rav said they switched it around and made believe it was Karna, so it can't be, whatever. He said exactly like Shmuel. That tzricha get, but tzricha mian. You need get and mian. Now, why would you need a get? The girl didn't do anything. Perhaps her father did consent to the Kidushin, and he's okay with it, so then it's going to be a Kidushin. So since of that concern, we require a get. At the same time, but tzricha mian. You need to have mian. Why do you need to have mian? Because maybe, perhaps her father did not consent to the Kidushin, but people might assume that her Kidushin was effective. Why? Because she was given a get. If she was given a get, people say, oh, she was married. So who cares which one it is? The Yomer people are going to say, Ein Kidushin Teivsin B'Chaisa. If the Mekadosh would ultimately give her sister Kidushin, they're going to assume that it's not effective because she's a Ches Kirush Shasai, and they're just going to send her away. But the truth, it is effective because he was not married to the first sister, and therefore you would require a get for the second sister. So we need to give you mean to people say, what are you giving me in? Oh, giving me in because maybe it's not. Oh, maybe it's not. Oh, he's getting engaged to the second sister. Oh, you have to get because you weren't married to the first one, maybe. So that's the halacha that we had in the previous step. This is where we start 9 lines down on Memhei Amid Aleph. Itmar, continue on the related halacha. This guy, so you have to halt cup. It's one of those dafim that he did the Kidushin with this 10-year-old girl, shaloi l'dasavia, without the father's knowledge. Rav had said in that halacha, as we just mentioned, you require get and miyun. Get, maybe because the father was okay with it, maybe he wasn't, so then you wouldn't need anything, but we require miyun, so people should realize, they say, hey, wait a second, something going on over here. Why require miyun? Because maybe it wasn't, and therefore with the sister, you require a get. Now, what happens if this guy that did the Kidushin Shaloi L'Dasavia, this 15-year-old boy, this 10-year-old girl, he's maced, he dies. Now, now, if technically she's engaged to him, she falls to the brother for Yibam. He has a 17-year-old brother. She falls for Yibam to him. What's the halacha? So Rav, again, this is the name of Rav who said the teaching. What does that mean? So Rashi explains. She requires miyun with the get that has to be given. Meaning, if he does a mimer, what's a mimer? A mimer is rabbinic kedushin that applies to a yavam. The get that you always require, if you don't want to go ahead with this yibum, you did a mimer, so you could consummate the relationship. Go ahead, do bia, and that's it. You guys are husband and wife. And they say, no, I'm not interested in this girl and my sister. So you need a get for that mimer. So on that, Rav is saying that she requires miyun with that get that you need to do for that mimer.
What about chalitza? Do they chayv in chalitza if such case?
Yeah, you're gonna have to do.
Why? The shiur or not?
What?
Just like it's a suffix Kidushin, but it has to be suffix chalitza, and if it's a suffix chalitza, then we say that there's no chalitza, right?
What do you mean suffix chalitza?
Because if there's no Kidushin, then she wouldn't be.
Right. So yeah, let's finish up the case because the Gemara is going to mention this point itself. The Gemara says, but if, let's say, there was no mimer, just whatever, she fell for Yibum to the brother, that there's no get, because there's no mimer, there's just chalitza, which is what you bring up for the zika. So that, says Rav, ve'enim me'enes lezikasai. That chalitza, that the brother's going to be doing, because again, we're saying that maybe there was a kedusha with the first brother, does not require to do miyun with that chalitza, which the Gemara is going to explain right now, this halacha, which is a wonder. Why wouldn't you do a miyun? Because maybe it's not a real chalitza like you were just bringing up, just like you say that you do a miyun when there's a get, because maybe it wasn't a real kedushin. What's the reason when you're doing mimer, then you do a miyun with that get, but when there's no mimer, when there's only the zika, then you're just going to do chalitza and you're not going to do miyun with it. So on that, Rav illustrates Kate at how so. So the halacha is like this. Asaba maimer, if the yavam does a maimer, which the Gemara in Yavama Daf Yomi tells us that if someone does a maimer in his Yavama, and now he's coming to let her go without ever consummating the relationship, you require a get for the maimer, and you require a chalitza for the zika. Now, this case where the person had done Kidushin without the father's consent, tzricha get, v'tzricha chalitza, v'tzricha miyun. You need to have three things: a get, a chalitza, and a miyun. Meaning, you need to have miyun with those two things. Why? So the Gemara explains. Tzricha get. The reason why you need a get is shema nisratza ha'av b'kedusha sheni. The second born, meaning the brother, the yavam, he did a maimer. That maimer is a kedushin. Maybe the father was okay with that kedushin. So if that's the case, you need a get for that maimer, right? Remember, if whatever he's doing is nothing, the first brother, the second brother, without the father's consent, because she's a katana. So maybe the father is going to be okay with the kedushin of the second one. Okay, that's why you need get. Now, tzricha chalitza, why do you need to have chalitza? Because shema nisratza abbe kedusha rishon. Maybe the father was okay with the first brother's kedushin. If that's the case, that means to say that there was an engagement, and now when he dies, there's halacha of yibum with the second brother. So if he doesn't want to go ahead with it, you require chalitza. Now, tzricha miyun. At the same time, you need to have miyun too. Why do you need miyun? Because shema loy nisratza av. No, maybe the father is not consenting. Loy b'kedusha rishon, not with the first brother, but loy b'kedusha sheni, not with the second brother, with even his mimer. And if that's the case, this girl would not require not get for the second one's mimer and not chalitza for the first one's kedushin.
But it can't go both ways.
No, we don't know. We don't know with the father.
You do know on the second case. You do know with the brother. You do know his intention.
No, you don't know the father. These guys, they want to do kedushin. He wants to do a mimer. The second brother, the first brother gave her a nice diamond that he bought, and it's the father who. Yeah, why can't we just ask him? It's a great question. But this is what we're concerned for. We don't know the father's intent. So we're going to give a get and a chalitza misafik. But maybe you don't require not get and not chalitza. Oh, and this is the same concern we had from Rav in the previous daf, just a little bit more complex, more layered. V'yaimru, and those who see that we required this girl to get a get, they're going to say, wow, must have been a full-fledged kedushin. That's why she has a get. And they're going to say, then ain't kedushin teifsin ba'chaisa. Therefore, kedushin is not going to take effect in the sister. So if this yavam, so to speak, if she's not going to do miyun to him, then if he would ever get engaged to her sister, people would say, nah, let her go. We're talking about it. I don't have to do anything because she got a get from him. Problem is, maybe that get was unnecessary. Maybe she was never engaged to him, and then therefore, if he would ever get engaged to the sister, you would require a get. So therefore, to avoid that problem, we require also miyun, which is the same halacha from Rav and Shmuel from the previous daf, that people should know. Say, wait a second, why do miyun? Miyun is when it's not a real biblical kedushin. Yeah. It might not have been a real biblical. Oh, okay. If you ever get to the sister, you require a get that. Now, Rashi has a question which Taisa discuss at a great length too. He says, wait a second. Why did you tell me, when you wanted to explain to me why you have to do miyun in this case, besides the get and the chalitza, that maybe the father was not okay with kedushin of the first one and kedushin of the second one? What are you talking about? Even if the father was okay with the kedushin of the first one, but not okay with the second one's kedushin, it still would not be quote unquote a get, because the second one's mimer was insignificant. And if there's no get, so then kedushin would be typhus in the sister, because kedushin is typhus in the sister, even if he's doing chalitza, as we're going to shortly explain. And the one who sees that you're required to get is going to say that, oh, it's a full-fledged get, and kedushin is not typhus in the sister, and you're going to require miyun. So why do you have to say that maybe the father was not okay with the kedushin of the first one, that that's why you require miyun? You would require miyun even if he was okay with the kedushin of the first one. Says Rashi, I say that you're right. This that the Gemara is saying Shemelo in the Schwartzberg Kedusha Rishon is what's called Kedinisba. It's like it was just said together, but really that's not really necessary. I could have told you can be chayiv and miyun, even if just the second one's kedushin he wasn't okay with, because then you still have the same problem. you need to have miyun because it turns out really it's not really a chayz kidushasei because it's not a real get. And a chayz chalitzasei, we're going to explain shortly, don't require miyun. So I don't need to have really, according to Rashi, shemelin nesrat sa'av b'kedusha rishon. Okay, but now the Gemara continues explaining. There was two things Rav said. One is ma'enz lemamoroi, which is the case we just explained. It sounds a little bit difficult, but Rav's very few words holds a lot in there. We just explained now his halacha ma'enz lemamoroi, that when there's a maimer of the yavam, you're gonna have to do get, chalitza, and miyun. But then he said ve'enim ma'enz lizikasai. What does it mean? You don't do mean for the zika. It means to say when there's only zika and there's no maimer. So that's what the Gemara is explaining now. Lo yasaba maimer. If the yavam did not do a maimer, then ain't it chalitza bavad. No, then you only require chalitza, and you don't require also a miyun. So the Gemara is going to ask the question, why? Ma'amad, what are you going to say? You're going to ask and say, Tiboy nam miyun. No, of course you should require miyun. Because maybe people are going to say, in Kidushin Daf, how could you not do miyun also? What happens is that he's going to do chalitza. People are going to say, if he ever gets engaged to her sister, no, achais chalutza. You don't have to do any get when you got engaged to this sister 5 years later. They're going to say, just send her away. So why do you need to require, why wouldn't you require miyun? You should have the same concern of the other case. As the Gemara, no. Hakol yoidim, everyone knows that even if this chalitza was a full-fledged chalitza, everyone knows that Kedushin would take effect in the sister. Why? Because Achayis Chalutza, the sister of the woman that he did Chalitza to, is only forbidden from the Rabbanan. It's only rabbinically forbidden. So of course we know Kedushin. Everyone's going to know he's going to require a get if he ever does. The whole concern is we're running into saying, people are going to say you don't require a get because Achayis Kedushasai, Achayis Chalutza is different than Kedushin.
What does that come into play? It's only talking about one zika here. Achos chalitza is not no geya.
No, we're saying that you have to do chalitza because maybe the father was okay with the first one's kedushin. If he was okay with the first one's kedushin, let me say she was engaged to the first brother who died without any children. Now the brother has to do chalitza. If the first one was engaged, then the second one has to do chalitza. It's only with Maimer was the first case, which is the second one's own kedushin, that the father has to be okay with that too. But Zika is already a biblical obligation once the first one's kedushin was a kedushin. So the problem we're running into is we're saying, but wait a second. If you're doing chalitza, people are going to think it's as chayz chalutza. Why don't you require mean? Maybe it's not really a chayz chalutza. So who cares? Anyway, if he ever got engaged to the second sister, anyways, we would know that he has to give her a get. The whole concern is saying, chayz kedusha, you don't have to give a get. So therefore, we have to make sure the first one you do miyun, so that people will know that, oh, maybe it wasn't a real get, maybe it wasn't really not married, maybe. So therefore, if baby gets engaged to the sister, you got to give a get. Here, there's no such a problem because everyone's going to know you got to give a get because everyone knows that when you did chalitza to the first one, anyways, would not make you biblically prohibited to the sister, and kedushin would take effect. Because the Amar Shloker says, Kan Shana Rebbe. Here is where Rebbe said, meaning in Mesechtes Yavamis, the Mishnah teaches that if someone does chalitza to his yavama, then his brother marries her sister, and then that brother dies, the halacha is he does chalitza and doesn't do yibum. That was a little bit of a complex case. I'll just say it over again just to get that. Someone does chalitza to his yavama. His brother died without any children. So he does chalitza to this woman Rachel. Then his brother marries Leah, the sister of this Rachel. And then his brother who married Leah died. Now this guy who did chalitza to Rachel is going to have to do chalitza to this Leah and not do yibum. That's only by chalitza. But if someone divorced his wife, and then his brother married his wife's sister, his ex's sister, and then his brother dies, then she's pater. He doesn't even do chalitza over there because that's achayis kidushasai, which is an erva for him when his wife is still alive. And this Mishnah is what Rish Lakish says. Oh, here Rebbe's teaching us. From this Mishnah we learn out that Achayis Kedusha, the sister of the woman he divorced, that's an erva midairaisa from biblical halacha, which totally exempts. There's no Kedushin, you're in the mitayfis, and you don't have to give a get. Whereas Achayis Chalutza, a sister of the woman he gave chalitza to, that's only midairaisa, it's only for rabbinic law, and therefore yes, that's what we're saying, that you would require chalitza, and there would be no miyun because it doesn't make a difference. Anyways, everyone knows if you ever got engaged to the sister, you would require a get because biblically Kidushin is being typed. So a little bit complex, but that was these few words Rabbi said. Two different cases. One is when you do a mimer, and one is when you don't do a mimer. When you do a mimer, we said that then you're going to require miyun because you run into the problem of people saying that maybe you're going to say in Kidushin terms of the problem is that you had to get by the first one. People are going to think it's achis Kidushasai. When you run into that problem, then you got to give a miyun. But when you don't do a mimer, then you only require chalitza and you don't require a miyun because there's no concern anyway. It's at most an achis chalutza, and everyone's going to know achis chalutza anyways. If you did Kidushin with the sister, it's going to be type and it will require a get. Now, a related conversation, this that we're talking about, that when a girl gets engaged without her father's knowledge, so we're concerned maybe the father's going to be okay with it and therefore require a get. At the same time, maybe he's not, to require me to counterbalance that. In contrast to that, the Gemara brings the following story. Hanabeit today, there were these two men. They were called Shosu Chamra. Of course, what do you do? Make a l'chaim. These two guys are drinking wine. Toisi tzifei babavel. So either it means to say beneath a tree of tzafzafa, which are very appropriate with this time of the year, type of an arava, type of a willow, aruvas, or another interpretation is actually a mat that's placed over these bolts that protrude, these pegs that protrude into the street, meaning some type of a canopy that people sit underneath because of the sun. Be that as it may, they're sitting and drinking wine. Shokol chad meinayu costed the chamra, so one of them took a cup of wine. Yovli lechavre. He says, you got to taste this Cabernet, you don't understand. He gives it to his friend. And Amay says, I'm giving this cup of wine to you. I want your daughter to be engaged to my son. It's expensive wine. This is a $1,000 bottle of wine. Imagine how much each drop, every molecule of that wine is. It says, here's a cup of wine. I want your daughter to be engaged to my son. That was the story. Ravina says, Ravina, even according to one that says, that when the girl gets engaged without her father's knowledge, we say, we have this whole halacha, Rav and Shmuel, we're concerned that maybe the father's okay, require a get, and me, and then everything. That, says the Gemara Zaketim and Beis, is only by a girl with the father. But Shem and Esratza haben, maybe the son is going to be okay with the Kidushin that his father did for him without his awareness. Lo yamin, that we don't say. What's the reason? So Rashi says, the father, for the Kidushin of his daughter, he's okay as long as you bring home a guy. I'm okay, because tav lemesav tandu. It's better for a girl to have someone than nobody. Just come on with a guy. But a man, he's very particular. He looks for who he wants, and a son is not in his father's domain to get him engaged to a woman without sending him as a shliach. So to be concerned that maybe the son is okay with who his father picked out. You tell me, you were in the shtibel and you said, taka this, yenem zatochta, größe Glück. No. We're not even concerned that maybe the son is okay with what the father did. However, the Gemara is, but he asked back to him, Amalei Rabban Ravina. So this is what Ravina said. Rabban asked Ravina, really? Is that the case? But maybe the son made his father a shliach to do this, and therefore the father's looking around, scouting around, finding good girls, and he sees this guy has a daughter on the market. He says, I want to know for my son. How do you know that we shouldn't be chayshish that the son is okay with that? Says Gemara, no, lechotzef inish l'shavi lavu shliach. A person would not have the audacity to make his father a shliach. You don't make your father a shliach. You don't tell him, you be my shadchan, you be my agent to go get me engaged to a girl. Says Gemara, okay, maybe it's not going to make him a shliach, but v'dilma atzuya artse, maybe the son was pouring out his soul, kamei, in front of his father. He revealed his intent that he wants that girl, and the father on his own went and made himself a shliach. And that's the halacha of zachan l'adam shlei b'fanav. You can marry the person when he's not this. How do you know? He says, this girl, you don't understand, she's amazing, I'll never get married to her. Father's like, listen, leave it to me. He goes, schmears him and this and that. He takes out the nice wine, this and that. And then he gets engaged. How do you know? Maybe he's not going to make him a shlich, but maybe he was just meratze kameh, and the father on his own went and did it. So Amalei Rabbi Bar Simi says, Befeidish amamar. What he's trying to say is, I explicitly heard from Ravina that the leisaver lahad Rav Shmuel. You have a good question, and this is the way Rashi explains it. He says a conversation about this, but he doesn't even hold of Rav and Shmuel, meaning he's not even concerned of the halacha from the previous stuff that we were discussing all along, that maybe the father would be okay when the girl gets engaged to a guy. So for sure that maybe the son made his father a shliach, we're not going to be concerned with that unless we knew that that was the fact. Rashi just says that Ravina had said, even according to one who holds, that was l'Rav Chedemilsa, that they should just accept what he's saying. But really, he himself didn't hold of Rav and Shmuel. So if you don't even hold of Rav and Shmuel, that Shem and Neshat Sa'av, for sure we're not going to be concerned Shem and Neshat Sa'ben, and therefore that's why he said in this story, there's nothing to be concerned about, that this guy gave him a cup of wine and says, let your daughter be engaged. My son said, yeah, L'chaim, the two tatas, it says, no bashos even, just the two fathers. No, you don't have to be concerned for him because he's not concerned for Shem and Nesratza. For sure he's not concerned for Shem and Nesratza Ben. Now, related conversation to this halacha back of Rav and Shmuel from the previous daf about when the girl, let's say a 10-year-old girl gets engaged, which she has no right, but maybe the father's going to be okay with it, and therefore we have to be concerned. So who gaver the Kaddish Bekisha? There's a certain man that got, he betrothed the girl with a bundle diyarka of vegetables, beshuka in the street. And this is the case of it's a katana, a minor girl, that without the father's knowledge. So Amar Ravina, again, another teaching from Ravina, he says the same wording like he said before. Afil amanda Amar, even according to Rav and Shmuel, even according to the one who holds from the previous daf. The general concerned that maybe the father's going to be okay with it, and here he gave him a nice $10 bundle of vegetables. Maybe they're engaged. No, when would we say that maybe the father's going to be okay with it? It's a rooftop in the city with, who knows what they do these days. Covered the way, honorable way. Then we're saying maybe the father's going to say, okay, Lamaisa, she got a guy. He did it right. Fine. But in a degrading way, no father is going to be, we're not concerned that maybe the father's okay with it. Gives her a bundle of vegetables here. It's $5.55 here. This is, your Kidushin. For that, we're not concerned that any father would be okay with it, and even they would be agreeing. Now, the Gemara wants to understand the case. It says, wait a second. When you said, because here was degrading, what was the degradation that you're saying for sure the father's not going to be okay? Is it the disgrace because a bunch of vegetables? You can tell me carrots, and that's going to be the Kidushin? Or is it because in the street? That's not how you do it out in the street, unless you're getting like 5,000 people to start singing together and do some type of show or whatever this and that. But stop in the middle of the street, you don't do an engagement. Says Gemara Nafkamina, the ramification of this is the Kaddish Bekaspa Beshuka. The reason why it's important is either because if, let's say, he gave her a diamond ring, some expensive money in the street, so you wouldn't have the degradation of the item, but it would be still in the street. Or Bekisha the Arka Bebesa, or let's say does it a nice little ceremony in the house, privately, discreetly, but he takes out these nice vegetables and says, here, will you be my carrot? Or whatever he says, whatever line he wants to say. My, what would halacha be? Which one is it? Amalei says, either one is embarrassing. Either one of them would be bezayin, and therefore any one of these would not be considered as a kedushin, that we would be concerned that the father would say, oh, I'm so excited, you brought him a guy, what did he do? Or he gave me a bunch of carrots. No, zichanad, that's not going to be as a kedushin. Another story the Gemara brings is Hahu the Amar. There was a person, the man said that, a very interesting, one of these Shalom Bayis stories. There was a man who was saying that he had a 8-year-old daughter, let's say, a daughter that was a ketana. He said, Likrivai. He's having a conversation with his wife one night, they're eating dinner, and he says, I want to marry off our Rachel to my relative, my cousin Matal. My first cousin, he's a great guy, I want to marry her off. The wife, Amr Likriva, she says, no, my relative, my Shulam, there's no one like him. I want to marry our Rachel to Shulam. So Kafte, so this is something that's already seen from Talmudic times, she forces the husband, and he gives in. Ada Amala tells her, okay, Fruma, Tahava Likriva, no problem. You win again. and it goes to your relative. Fine, but the story continues. They made a whole party, everyone's excited, they send out the WhatsApp, and they're making this suda for the excitement, for the engagement, and they invite their relatives. At the achli v'shasi, as they're eating and drinking, everyone's having a good time, the sternos are out, and the waiters are out, white gloves. Asa krivei be'igra, can't make this stuff up. His relative comes on the upper story, rooftop lounge, whatever they had, wherever they're renting out over there, and the kid Shah, discreetly, he always had something for this Rachel, this Matal. He comes and he gets her engaged. Now the father didn't yet accept the Kidushin from the Shulim, the relative of his wife. So Shilas, what do we do now? This is the story. Some Abaya says, except there's a pasuk in Tzefania that says, She'edis Yisrael, the remnant of the Jewish people, lo yasu avlo, they're not going to do avla, which iniquity is not a great translation, but they're not going to do wrong things. V'lo yidabru chazav, and they're not going to speak lies. So what does that mean? So Rashi says, what the Gemara is trying to say, Abaye is saying, we're not concerned in this case, Shem and this Ratza'av. I mean, for sure you'd say Shem and he wanted this matal for his daughter. No, because he's not going to back out from what he promised his wife for Shulam. So therefore, we're going to say that, it says Abaya, here, it's not going to be considered as a Kiddush. We're not going to be Chayshin Shem and Av to what Matal did, giving her that ring on the rooftop while everyone's having that party down there in the lounge. That's Abaya's shot. Rav Amma, he says a different reason. He says, no, for sure the father was not okay with this, what Matal did, because the father spent a nice mint on making this party for this whole engagement to Shulim. Chazaka, we presume, no one is going to put in the effort to make a whole party and cause a huge loss where everyone's up in arms, everyone's walking out, what's going on over here, scandal, whatever, shanda, who knows, whatever. He made this whole party. You got to wonder why maybe he can't make it a party for Matzal, but that's what the Gemara seems to say, that wouldn't be a party. There'd be a lot of insults, and that would end pretty bad. They would have to call down the cops.
It's nothing.
Yeah, so
we learned Kidushin. We said if a young boy says to a young girl with a fake ring that this is Kidushin, it's certainly not with us father.
Right. If here we're talking about Katana, that's talking about, let's say, a 13-year-old girl or a 15-year-old girl. Right, but here, if she's a minor, so it's all go based on the father's. I mean, it would be different if she's a Yisayma. Then there's a halacha of rabbinic marriage. But akapanim, when there's a father, there's no rights that she has. It's only because maybe we're concerned the father might be okay. And Abai and Rava both say, this case, out of the question, nothing to talk about because the father's not going to be okay. Says, what's between Abai and Rava? It could be tarach. The difference is, if let's say he didn't put an effort to make a whole meal, he took out some kegel from the fridge and some bisla hating that was left over already, still there in shul. And then in the upper story with the Vabashil is where this guy Matal came. According to Abaya, since this guy, he already gave in to his wife, so he says the guy's not backing out from his wife. If he wants to stay married himself, then definitely he's not going to back out. And we're not concerned that Shem and Ab. But according to Rava, the whole reason was because he made this whole event and he spent who knows what to thing, and here he didn't. So Taka maybe the father would be okay. So Matli starts laughing and says, sorry for him, this is what it is. And Matli got us, beat us to it, and he would back out. So that would be the difference between Abaya and Rava for this case. Now, continue on this theme, says the Gemara, meaning regarding the case of the girl getting engaged without the father's awareness. Here it gets a little bit more complex. Says the Gemara, Niskadsha Ladasavia. Okay, what happens if, let's say, the engagement was with the father's awareness? He's there with his daughter, and they're in the Six Flags, and then this guy comes over and says, I really like your daughter, I want you to know. And he says, I want to get engaged. He says, what are you offering? He says, it pulls out something with platinum or whatever, this and that. He says, okay, go ahead. Niskadsha Ladasavia. But then the father says, but I'm leaving now, I'm going on a business trip. Father goes out and he flies off on his jet, he's overseas. But while he's away, while he's out of town, they go ahead and they get married. What's the halacha? Some Rav says, she, if he's a kayan, so she could eat truma, even though this chuppah was without the father's awareness. The Rabbanan tells us, a woman cannot eat truma until she goes to the chuppah. Now here, since the Kidushin was with his awareness, he would be also okay with the chuppah. He liked the guy. He obviously was okay with the Kidushin. Until the father comes along and he protests and says, no, over my dead body. I never said there could be a chuppah. I never said it could be a marriage. Until he protests, we're going to assume that he's okay with it and never should eat truma. Rav Asher says, no, she cannot eat truma. What do you mean? If it turns out the father comes along and he protests, comes out retroactively, she was not Aisha's Kayin, because the father was not okay with the marriage, and therefore he has to give the green light. Comes out retroactively, he was in Truma. Taisa says it's not really a Zara Deiraisa, it's really a rabbinic Zara, because biblically, once you have Kidushin, you could, but rabbinically it would be a Zara. Therefore, Ravasi says, no, that would not be okay. And Hava Uvda, but the Gemara says there was a story, although Rav disagreed with Ravasi, and Taisa has a whole discussion regarding what the halacha should be based on that, but even though Rav says she could eat Truma, Lamaisa Rav deferred to Ravasi when a story came up, and he didn't let her eat Truma because the father might not be okay with it. Comes retroactively, rabbinically, she was a Zar. Now, that's one halacha. Now the Gemara continues and says, but moreover, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, Rav would agree, meaning, even though regarding Truma, we presume with a chazaka that the father is going to be okay with the chuppah and she could eat Truma. That's over there where if we say that the father was not okay, no, says Rashi, biblically she was allowed to eat anyway, because an engaged woman could eat truma from biblical law. You want to say rabbinically. Okay, for that, we're going to assume the father's going to be okay with it. But regarding Yerusha, this girl would die, and she has a wealthy family, and the father was flying away for business, and she has her own estate, for the husband to inherit her has to be she'ei roy. Their Rav would agree that she's only like engaged to him, and we're not going to consider the chuppah, she'emesa, that if the girl dies, einu yarsha, that chassan is not going to inherit her, because since we're not sure if the father was okay with the chuppah or not, we're going to say that the money remains with the presumption of its original owner, which is by the girl, and not this guy who did a chuppah with her. With technically, if they had a chuppah, it would be she'ela. He would inherit her. He would take her, $5 million that she has in her own bank account. No, for that, even Rav would agree that we would not consider for that the father was okay that they were married. Now, another case, the Gemara continues. No, that's by marriage. That's she'erai. Has to be a marriage, not by Kidushin. Now the Gemara has it gets a little bit more detailed, more complex. Niskat shaladas. Okay, what happens if she gets engaged with her father's intent? V'nisa shaloi ladas. When she gets married, she doesn't let her father know, but vavia kan. Father did not go overseas. Father's still in town, but under his own nose, without him knowing, she gets married in town. So we have a machlokes. Rav Huna says that she does not eat truma. We're not concerned for the chuppah. V'yirmi ba'aba Amachel says no, she does eat truma. So the Gemara explains the machlokes. Rav Huna says that she did not eat truma, and he explains. And interestingly, each one wants to say in Rav the other way. But Rav the Amachel is even according to Rav that said in the previous case that when he goes overseas, she's going to eat truma. Hasam hu delo isalav. That's because the father's not around. He's in overseas. And maybe he'd be okay with it. So, okay, we let her eat truma. But here, if the father's around, hide the ishtik. The reason why he's quiet is because mirtach rotach. He's boiling. He's fuming. He's upset. That's why he's quiet. In the previous case, he's quiet because he's overseas, or he was overseas. Here, you shouldn't tell me. She made a chuppah in some backyard without inviting me. So the fact that he's quiet, we're not chayshishin shem. We're saying he's upset, he's fuming, and he's one of those silent types that he's holding it in, and therefore we're not going to let her eat truma. He says the opposite. He says a chelis, and he's going to say the other man the amar. The filler of Asi, even according to Ravasi that we said in the previous case when the father goes overseas. The amar eino chelis that you cannot eat because maybe the father's not going to be okay. Here he actually holds that you would be able to. Why? Because they were concerned maybe the father's going to come and protest. But over here, why is he quiet? He's probably okay with it. He's laughing. Okay, it's a little chutzpah. They didn't invite me to the wedding. He's quiet. He's not protesting because he's okay with it. So they have this disagreement regarding why is the father being quiet. Is he boiling, or is he because he's okay with it? And therefore each one wants to say, even the other Madama would agree in this case. Now, a similar case, but it gets even more complicated, is Niskat Shlomo Dasavia. She gets engaged without the father's knowledge, and Benista Shlomo Das. She gets married without the father's knowledge. But Vavia Khan, the father was in town. Rav Huna Macheles, Rav Huna says, she's going to eat Truma. She got engaged and married without the father, without telling him, and she's going to be able to eat. And Rav Yirmiyah says, no, Enechel is not going to be able to eat. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Amma Uli says, Rav Huna, this teaching Rav Huna is like he quotes a pasuk in Mishlei. It's like vinegar to the teeth. And everyone knows you take the apple cider, you got to take it with a straw, you don't want to ruin your teeth. Or like smoke to the eyes, which you get smoke in the eyes. How could he say such a thing? Hashda, if you recalled in the previous machlekes, he said something umahas in the Kidushin rice in the previous case, when the Kidushin was ladas of the father, and the Kidushin was biblical. It was only the marriage was shaloi ladas. Amrid, you Rav Huna said, loy achlish, she cannot eat, because maybe the father is boiling, he's upset. Hoch over here, that even the Kidushin was shaloi ladas. She didn't even tell him about the engagement. Like Koshka, and you're telling me over here that she could eat truma? How does that even make sense? So therefore, as the Ketim Top Manalev says, Ula nirin direi Talmud. Ula finishes teaching. He says, I can't understand Rav Huna. For sure, Rabbi Yirmiyah the Talmud, who says that she cannot eat, for sure must be the halach. But Amar Rava resolves. He says, no, I'll explain to you the reason for this. My Talmud Rav Huna, what's the reason Rav Huna? Hoil v'nasa b'maisi yisayma b'chaye ha'av. What does that mean? In this guy's lifetime, she got engaged and she got married without telling the father. It's as if she's the Yisayma, not the classic when we say Yisayma Chaya which the father married her off and therefore he has no more rights in her. No, she's almost like an orphan in his lifetime because he saw her getting engaged. She didn't tell him, but he saw she, without his consent, he saw she getting engaged and getting married and he was quiet. So therefore, either he gave up all the rights that he has in her, or his shtika is kaidah, his sound is like admission. Because I could understand when the Kidushin was, she asked him, Tati, what do you say about this? Like, yes, my blessings for the Kidushin. But then when she gets married without his das, you could say, okay, one time being quiet, okay, maybe he's fuming. But so much, mekenzach neshayin help. To do the Kidushin and in the Suin, the guy would have said something. So either it's because he says, you know what, I don't know you, I have nothing to do with you anymore, you do whatever you want to do, or his silence is like he's admitting. But be that as it may, this case is actually better than the first case, meaning in this case, she's actually considered engaged and married, and she can be able to eat truma, in contrast to the first case, where she's actually not going to be able to go ahead and eat truma. Thank you to anything for hosting us.